Welcome. You've settled in, perhaps lying back, ready to let your mind drift slowly into the rhythm of the past. Tonight, we journey not into a world of battle or conquest, but into a quieter, stranger corner of history. The land is Egypt, more than 3,000 years ago. The time is the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten, one of the most unusual rulers in all of ancient history. Unlike other kings who sought only wealth or empire, Akhenaten pursued a vision of the divine, one that altered the very fabric of Egyptian life. His obsession with the sun god, Aten, would create a radical break with centuries of tradition. He built a city in the desert, wrote hymns to the sun, and reshaped art in his image. And yet, his story is not remembered only for his religious revolution. It is remembered too for a mystery, a taboo, and a union whispered through time, the pharaoh who is said to have married his own daughters. This is not a tale told with drama or thunder, but one approached with patience, with care, and with curiosity. Together, we will drift through the sands of Amarna, walk softly among the courtyards of Akhenaten's new city, and watch, without judgment, the strange rhythms of a king who defied both gods and men. So let your breathing slow, let your thoughts settle, and imagine yourself under the golden light of the Egyptian sun, where every stone, every inscription, still speaks softly across millennia. Imagine yourself stepping quietly into the land of Egypt more than 3,000 years ago. The morning sun has just crested the eastern cliffs, painting the desert in pale gold. The air is still cool, though you can already sense the warmth building. Before you stretches a city unlike any other in Egypt. Its name is Akhenaten, the horizon of Aten. Today we call it Amarna. Unlike Thebes or Memphis, which grew slowly over centuries, Amarna rose quickly, almost suddenly, carved out of the desert by decree of a single man, Pharaoh Akhenaten. His vision of a city devoted entirely to the sun god Aten transformed an empty stretch of sand into a living, breathing settlement. The land around it is striking. To the east, steep limestone cliffs rise abruptly, pale and sheer, casting faint shadows that retreat as the sun climbs. Beyond them lies endless desert, stretching toward the Red Sea. To the west, the Nile winds calmly, its green banks brimming with fields of barley, flax, and emmer wheat. Farmers are already in those fields, their bare feet pressing into damp soil softened by the annual flood. Donkeys bray as they carry baskets of seed. Water buffalo sink lazily into canals to cool themselves. The city itself sits between these extremes, the harsh desert cliffs and the fertile river valley. Its layout is deliberate. Wide avenues cut through districts of houses, temples, and workshops. Rather than winding, narrow alleys, Amarna has space, openness, and symmetry. It was designed quickly, almost hurriedly, as though Akhenaten could not wait to see his vision take form. Life for most people begins in modest homes. Picture a simple mud brick house, its walls plastered smooth and painted with a thin wash of white. The roof is flat, used for sleeping on cool nights or for drying figs and onions in the sun. Inside, the rooms are small and dimly lit, with reed mats covering the packed earth floors. Clay lamps sit in niches, waiting for the evening to be lit with oil. At dawn, the household stirs. A mother kneads dough in a clay trough, her hands working rhythmically, pressing grain and water into heavy loaves that will be baked in a beehive-shaped oven. The smell of warm bread drifts into the courtyard. Children fetch water from a nearby well or from the Nile, balancing ceramic jars carefully. A father sharpens his tools for the day, perhaps a hoe for farming, or chisels for carving stone in the royal workshops. Meals are simple but filling, thick bread, stews of lentils and beans, onions, cucumbers, and occasionally dried fish. Beer is the drink of choice, not like the crisp drink we imagine today, but cloudy, nourishing, almost like a meal in itself. If a family is fortunate, they may have honey to sweeten their food, or dates brought from the palms along the river. As the day unfolds, work calls many into the city. The construction of Amarna has drawn thousands: builders, masons, plasterers, and carpenters. Imagine the steady rhythm of hammers striking stone, the scrape of chisels against limestone blocks, the calls of foremen guiding teams of laborers. Craftsmen sit at their benches, shaping faience beads that glisten turquoise when fired, or carving small amulets of the sun disk Aten. Potters' wheels hum as clay spins into jars, bowls, and tall storage vessels. In the textile workshops, women sit at looms, weaving linen cloth from flax fibers, the threads running smoothly through practiced fingers. Scribes, too, are ever present. With reed pens and ink made from soot or ochre, they record everything: deliveries of grain, offerings to Aten, lists of workers and their wages. Their handwriting flows across papyrus scrolls, careful and neat. For most people, literacy is rare, but scribes, trained from youth, hold power through their knowledge of symbols and words. Religion, too, touches each moment. For centuries, Egyptians had worshipped many gods: Ammonius of Thebes, Osiris of the underworld, Hathor of love and music, Thoth of wisdom. But Akhenaten's city is different. In Amarna, the god is Aten, represented not by a statue, not by an animal, but by the sun disk itself. Its rays extend downward, each ending in a tiny hand, touching the earth with warmth and life. There are no dark sanctuaries filled with incense and idols, but instead open-air temples where sunlight falls freely on the altars. Offerings of bread, beer, and flowers are placed in Aten's honor, the smoke of incense curling upward into the brightness. The art that decorates this city reflects this new vision. The king is shown with elongated features, a long face, full lips, narrow eyes. His body appears with wide hips, a soft belly, and slender limbs. Some believe these forms were literal, others that they were symbolic, meant to show the king as embodying both masculine and feminine qualities. By his side stands Nefertiti, tall and regal, her image as commanding as his own. Their daughters, small but prominent, are depicted often, their little hands raised in gestures of affection, their forms always close to their parents. Amarna's life is a mixture of the familiar and the unfamiliar. The rhythm of farming, cooking, weaving, and trading continues as it has for centuries. Yet there is a quiet unease. The old gods are gone from official life, and though people obey, some whisper prayers in secret. A farmer dropping seed into the earth might murmur Osiris's name under his breath. A mother might silently call upon Hathor during childbirth, though she would not dare to do so aloud. As evening approaches, the city softens again. The sun, Aten himself, descends toward the western horizon. Shadows lengthen. The air cools. Families gather in courtyards, sharing their bread and beer. Children laugh as they chase one another through the dust. Musicians pluck strings or play gentle notes on reed flutes. The smell of roasting fish or simmering onions drifts softly on the breeze. Night settles in slowly. The desert grows quiet, save for the distant call of night birds and the low murmur of conversation carried on the air. People climb to their rooftops to sleep under the stars, gazing at constellations they know by heart. For a time, there is peace. Yet in the heart of this city, within the great palace, the life of the king and his family unfolds in ways stranger than the lives of ordinary men and women. It is here, in Akhenaten's court, that devotion to Aten takes on its most curious and intimate form. And so, as daily life in Amarna ebbs into stillness, we move closer toward the chambers of the pharaoh himself, where the story turns from the ordinary rhythms of workers and farmers into the unusual choices of a ruler who would forever alter Egypt's history. Akhenaten was not always known by that name. At birth, he was called Amenhotep, the fourth pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. He was born into a line of rulers who had guided Egypt to wealth and stability. His father, Amenhotep III, reigned during what many consider a golden age. Temples rose in Thebes, foreign rulers sent gifts, and Egypt's power extended across lands far beyond the Nile. As a young prince, Amenhotep would have grown up surrounded by splendor. The palaces of Thebes were filled with columns painted in bright colors, gardens shaded by trees imported from foreign lands, pools filled with lotus blossoms floating on clear water. Servants, tutors, and priests would have guided his education, teaching him reading, ritual, and the art of kingship. Yet even in these early years, something about him seems to have been different. When he took the throne, he inherited a vast and powerful realm. At first, nothing seemed unusual. He ruled as Amenhotep IV, and the great god Ammonius was still worshipped in Thebes. But soon his thoughts turned toward something greater, something that would change the course of Egypt's history. Slowly, his devotion shifted away from the crowded pantheon of gods and fixed itself on one alone, the sun disk, Aten. At first, this devotion was subtle. He built a small temple to Aten within the great temple complex of Karnak, among the halls dedicated to Ammonius. Priests may have whispered, uneasy at the king's attention shifting elsewhere. Yet over time, the devotion grew stronger, and what began as reverence became obsession. Amenhotep changed his name. He was no longer Amenhotep, a name that honored the god Ammonius. He became Akhenaten, the effective one of Aten. With that change, the transformation of Egypt accelerated. He abandoned Thebes, the city of his ancestors, and sought out new ground. In the barren desert, he ordered the creation of a city dedicated entirely to Aten. This city became Amarna. In its broad avenues and open temples, he imagined a new world, stripped of the old gods, centered only on the sun. But Akhenaten was not merely a religious reformer. He was also a man, a husband, and a father. His queen, Nefertiti, stood always by his side. In reliefs and paintings, she appears as his equal, sharing his power, even smiting enemies in scenes usually reserved for kings alone. Their partnership was striking, their images everywhere, their love made public in ways unusual for Egyptian art. More striking still was the place of their daughters. 6 royal girls appear again and again in the art of Amarna. They sit on their parents' laps, they are kissed on the cheek, they stand beside the thrones. Where other pharaohs had filled their walls with scenes of war and conquest, Akhenaten filled his with family life, with sunlight pouring down on himself, Nefertiti, and the children. To some, this might have seemed tender, even endearing. Yet to others it raised questions. The daughters were not simply children, they were drawn into the rituals of the court. They appeared in processions, in ceremonies, in moments of worship. Their presence hinted at something more than mere family affection. Akhenaten's rule was not without difficulty. The priests of Ammonius had lost power and wealth, their temples closed, their statues defaced. Resentment simmered quietly, and beyond Egypt's borders, foreign rulers wrote letters pleading for aid against enemies, only to be met with silence. Akhenaten seemed less concerned with politics or war than with hymns to Aten, sung in open-air temples where rays of light fell on stone altars. Art from this period reflects his vision. Figures are elongated, bodies rounded, lips full, eyes narrow. Some see illness in these forms, others a deliberate attempt to show a different kind of truth. The king is shown not as a warrior with broad shoulders and perfect form, but as a man transformed, neither fully masculine nor feminine, his body a vessel for divine spirit. The rhythms of his life were devoted to Aten. Each morning he would appear at the open-air temple, raising his arms to the sun as it rose above the horizon. Offerings were laid out, bread, beer, flowers, roast meat. Hymns were sung, praising Aten for giving life to all things. At night, the city quieted, but the devotion did not fade. The very walls of palaces and homes carried inscriptions of Aten's light. Through it all, Akhenaten held fast to his vision, though he must have known it caused unease. Egypt had long been a land of tradition, of countless gods and ancient rituals. To sweep them away was to uproot more than religion, it was to challenge the very fabric of society. Yet he pressed on, certain of his path, certain of Aten's supremacy. And within the palace, away from the gaze of workers and scribes, his family remained at the center of it all. Nefertiti, ever radiant, and the daughters, always near, shaped his private world as much as Aten shaped his public one. It was within these walls that the most unusual whispers of his reign took form. For it was said that Akhenaten's devotion extended not only to his god, but also, in forbidden ways, to his own bloodline. As the life of the city unfolded outside, the court within the palace became the stage for choices that would leave historians puzzled for centuries. Choices that would blur the lines between devotion, dynasty, and taboo. Choices that would define Akhenaten not just as a heretic king, but as a ruler whose personal life became as mysterious as his religious revolution. And so, with the light of Aten still pouring down on the city of Amarna, we move from the tale of Akhenaten's rule into the shadowed mystery of his unions, where the lines of family and royalty grew strangely intertwined. The story of Akhenaten cannot be told without acknowledging one of its most puzzling and unsettling elements, the suggestion that he may have taken his own daughters as wives. To us, the idea feels strange, even troubling. Yet in ancient times, royal families often blurred the lines of kinship, believing that the blood of kings carried divine qualities. To preserve that blood, marriages between close relatives were not unheard of. Still, the whispers around Akhenaten stand apart, wrapped in mystery, and softened only by the uncertainty of evidence. In Egyptian tradition, pharaohs sometimes married their sisters. It was thought to mirror the gods, who themselves were said to have wed their siblings in the myths of creation. By doing so, the king showed that he too lived in the realm of gods, above ordinary men. But daughters, this was far rarer, less clear, and it is here that Akhenaten's reign leaves us with riddles. The art of amarna is unusual in many ways, and one of its peculiarities is the central role of the daughters. We see them depicted constantly, climbing onto their parents' laps, embraced with kisses, standing with gestures of worship. In one scene, a daughter sits tenderly on Akhenaten's knee, her face lifted toward his, as rays of Aten stretch down with tiny hands to touch them both. Such intimacy in official art is almost without parallel in Egyptian history. Historians ask, were these images simply affectionate portrayals of family life, showing a loving father in ways earlier pharaohs had never dared to depict? Or were they signals of something deeper, something bound to ritual, power, and succession? Whispers of forbidden unions come from fragments of evidence. A few inscriptions hint that one of Akhenaten's daughters may have been elevated to the position of great royal wife. Her name was Akhenaten, the eldest, who appears in texts and scenes not only as a child but later as a queen. In the shifting years of Amarna, as Nefertiti's role becomes less clear, Akhenaten seems to step forward, filling a place beside her father that raises questions we still cannot fully answer. Other daughters, too, appear in contexts that suggest they were not merely children of the palace but participants in rituals reserved for royal consorts. Akhenaten, another daughter, would later marry Tutankhamun, her half-brother or perhaps her stepbrother. But some believe she, too, may have been joined earlier to her father. It is important, though, to pause and reflect on the uncertainty. The records are fragmentary. The sands of time have erased much, and what remains are broken reliefs, incomplete inscriptions, and statues with damaged faces. Historians debate fiercely, weighing every fragment. Some argue that the suggestion of incest is no more than misinterpretation. Others say the evidence, while thin, is too strange to ignore. When we picture this, we must do so gently. The palace at Amarna, with its painted walls and open courtyards, may have held ceremonies we cannot now reconstruct. Girls who once played in the courtyards may have been drawn into rituals of power and lineage. Whether these were unions of the body, or only of symbolism and ritual, remains uncertain. What is clear is that Akhenaten reshaped even the most intimate traditions of kingship, drawing his daughters into a vision that blurred family and divinity. Imagine the atmosphere inside those palace chambers. Columns painted with bright flowers, ceilings painted blue with golden stars, floors decorated with images of marshes and birds, sunlight filtering through lattice windows. Musicians playing quietly on harps, their soft notes filling the air. In that serene setting, the pharaoh, his queen, and his daughters lived out roles both ordinary and extraordinary, their lives intertwined with ritual, politics, and perhaps secrecy. Outside, the people of Amarna may have known little of these inner choices. To them, the royal family was divine, touched by Aten. If they saw the daughters standing beside their father as queens, they may have accepted it without question, believing it only reinforced their sacred nature. Within the palace walls, however, the line between family bond and royal duty blurred in ways that still puzzle us. This is the mystery of Akhenaten's unions, part fact, part speculation, part silence left by history. a silence that invites us to wonder but never allows us to know with certainty. And it is in that silence that the story of Amarna becomes as haunting as it is unique. As the years passed, however, the unusual choices of Akhenaten's reign came at a cost. His religious revolution weakened the old priesthood, and his focus on Aten left the empire vulnerable. Resentment grew. After his death, the city of Amarna would be abandoned, its walls left to crumble in the desert winds. The names of Akhenaten and his family would be struck from records, their images destroyed. Yet fragments remained, and through them, his life and his mysteries still whisper across the centuries. And so, as we leave behind the shadowed chambers of the palace and the unanswerable questions of forbidden unions, we turn outward again, toward the broader picture of Egyptian society. For while the king and his family lived lives of strangeness and ritual, the rest of Egypt, its priests, its nobles, its ordinary farmers, experienced these changes very differently. In that contrast, we see the full shape of Akhenaten's time. While the royal family lived within painted halls, surrounded by sunlight and ceremony, the wider world of Amarna carried on in quieter, harder rhythms. This contrast, between the palace and the streets, between the elite and the common people, offers us a fuller picture of life in Akhenaten's city. Step first into the homes of the wealthy. Their villas rise above the modest houses of workers, built from mud brick but decorated with care. The walls are plastered smooth, painted with scenes of gardens, ponds, and marshes. Courtyards are shaded with trees imported from other lands. Pools, lined with tiles, are filled with lotus blossoms floating on clear water. Servants tend to these spaces, fetching water, preparing meals, and keeping the air cool with dampened cloths hung in doorways. Inside, the rooms are larger and brighter. Wooden furniture is carved and inlaid with ivory. Cushions are covered in linen, dyed with faint colors. Jars of perfumed oil line the shelves, ready to anoint the skin and sweeten the air. At night, lamps burn brightly, not just one or two, but many, filling the rooms with a soft golden glow. Meals for the wealthy are more elaborate: goose roasted with herbs, fresh fish from the Nile, honey cakes flavored with figs. Music accompanies the meal, played by hired musicians with harps, flutes, and drums. These families live close to the king, not only in distance but in duty. Nobles attend the palace regularly, bringing reports, offering tribute, and carrying out the will of Akhenaten. They too must show devotion to Aten, joining in ceremonies beneath the open sky. Their lives are privileged, but also bound tightly to the shifting currents of the court. When the king's favor shines, they flourish. When suspicion falls, they are at risk of losing all. Now step further away from the palace, into the quarters of ordinary workers. Here the houses are smaller, clustered close together, their courtyards crowded with goats, chickens, and children at play. The air smells of bread baking in outdoor ovens, of smoke rising from simple clay hearths. Families sleep on mats spread over the floor. Furniture is sparse: a low stool, a small table, a few jars for storing grain. Daily life for these families is steady, repetitive, and demanding. The men may labor on construction projects, hauling stones, carving blocks, or carrying water to the work sites. Others farm the fertile strip along the Nile, guiding plows drawn by oxen, scattering seed, or harvesting grain with sharp flint sickles. Women spend long hours grinding flour on stone querns, kneeling as they push heavy stones back and forth. They weave linen, brew beer, prepare food, and care for the children. For the poor, meals are simple: flat loaves of bread, stew of lentils or beans, perhaps onions or leeks for flavor. Fish, if caught in the river, adds variety. Meat is rare, reserved for festivals or offerings. Beer, thick and nourishing, sustains them, served in clay cups passed around at mealtimes. And yet, even in these humble quarters, Aten is present. Small shrines are set into the walls, decorated with simple drawings of the sun disk. Families place offerings of bread or flowers, bowing their heads as the morning light spills into their courtyards. Though the grandeur of the open-air temples belongs to the elite, the devotion to Aten filters down into daily life. The contrast between palace and street could not be greater. In the palace, Nefertiti wears a tall blue crown, her form painted with elegance, her skin scented with oils from far-off lands. Her daughters wear golden ornaments, their hair braided and adorned with jewels. In the streets, a mother ties her child's hair with a simple cord, wipes dust from his face, and sends him to fetch water from the well. One world is painted in color and ceremony, the other in dust and labor. And yet both are bound together, woven into the fabric of Akhenaten's dream. The labor of the workers builds the palaces and temples. The wealth of the nobles sustains the rituals. The devotion of every family, rich or poor, feeds the vision of a city made for Aten. But this vision is fragile. Even as the sun shines, shadows gather. The priests of Ammonius, cast aside, wait in silence. Foreign rulers write unanswered letters, their pleas ignored. The people wonder quietly if Aten alone will protect their harvests, their children, their lives. The seeds of doubt grow, even as the city appears radiant under the desert sun. And in time, those seeds will blossom into the end of Amarna. After Akhenaten's death, the city will be abandoned, the temples left to crumble, the houses swallowed by sand. The names of Akhenaten and his family will be chiseled out of stone, erased from records, cursed as heresy. Yet even erased, the memory of this strange, luminous chapter of history lingers, refusing to vanish entirely. As we leave the streets of Amarna and the palace of the heretic king, we drift back into the present. The wind still blows across the desert cliffs. The sun still rises, just as it did for Aten's followers. And the whispers of Akhenaten's forbidden choices still echo faintly, softened by time, softened by distance, softened by the long sleep of history. And so, our long passage through the world of Akhenaten and his forbidden union draws to a close. You have walked through the painted corridors of palaces, where the king and his daughters lived beneath the eternal gaze of the sun. You have stepped into the rhythms of ordinary life, where bread was baked, water was carried, and prayers were whispered in small shrines. You have seen the dazzling contrast of power and poverty, of vision and doubt, of dreams rising in stone only to be swept away by the desert winds. Akhenaten sought to reshape the very heart of Egypt, binding its people to one God, one vision, one family. His choices defied tradition, even crossing the boundaries of kinship and marriage. To some, he was a visionary, to others, a heretic. History has not been gentle with his memory, yet his story remains one of the most remarkable chapters of the ancient world. And yet, as you rest here, far removed from the deserts of Amarna, you may feel how distant those struggles are. The stones that once shone white in the sun now lie weathered and broken. The names once forbidden are now spoken freely. The fears and hopes of that time have dissolved into dust, leaving only faint echoes for us to uncover. There is a kind of comfort in this. The storms of power, the weight of duty, the strangeness of choices once made, all of them pass away, softened by time. What remains is the gentle rhythm of human life, repeated across the centuries. The rising of the sun, the sharing of food, the bonds of family, the endless hope for a future brighter than the present. So now, as this journey comes to an end, allow yourself to drift into quiet reflection. Imagine the desert night around Amarna, still and vast, the stars scattered across the dark sky, the moonlight soft against the sands. The city lies in silence, its temples empty, its houses dark, its people long gone. Only the wind moves, carrying with it the secrets of a forgotten dream. Breathe slowly, as if you too are lying beneath those ancient stars. Feel the weight of history fall away, leaving only calm. The past is behind us, the present is gentle, and the future is yet to come. Rest now, and let the echoes of Akhenaten's world fade into silence, as the steady rhythm of sleep begins to take you, soft as the desert wind, timeless as the rising sun.